Unions have indicated that they will be urging the Gillard government to legislate penalty rates as a minimum entitlement and to back the creation of an employer-funded scheme to give casual and non-permanent workers access to portable paid leave. Here to tell us more, including what this might mean for business, Joydeep Hor, Managing Principal of specialist workplace law firm People and Culture Strategies. Joydeep, look, thanks very much for your time. Look, how significant are these calls, if you like?
I think it's very significant, a very timely issue. Christmas, New Year, big issue for employers at all times, but certainly around this time of year. The way the system works at the moment is that if you're covered by a particular award, and that award provides for particular penalty rates, well then by all means that'll set the minimum terms and conditions of your employment as far as penalty rates are concerned. I think what the ACTU are really responding to is a recognition from the other side of the political fence that some of these rates and allowances, etc., are imposing too much on business, and that's prohibitive for the long-term economic success of this country and business and whatever else. So I think there's this apprehension that if there is a change of government in 2013, that penalty rates will somehow be done away with, and so this is seen as a preemptive strike, if you like, to crystallise it into legislation, take it away from being an award-based issue and effectively make it law.
A pretty canny move then, by the sounds of it, by the ACTU.
Yeah, I think so. Whether it's a genuine response to the noise that's being made on the other side of the table, or whether this is something that's almost calling out the coalition to provide some clarity on what's going to be their IR policy in circumstances where we don't know a lot of detail. All
we know is they're not bringing back work choices, apparently. That seems to be the motto we've been hearing for some time.
And I think there was that long-term political scar around even mentioning those particular words. But I think it's important to appreciate that the coalition has not ruled out reintroducing individual contracts, and while AWAs are not going to be introduced in that particular form, I think there'll be a lot of pressure on the coalition to come up with a system that allows for greater flexibility and allows some form of recognition of an employer and an individual employee wanting to cut a deal between themselves.
Look, it seems from the people we speak to that from the business perspective that the pendulum in terms of industrial relations has swung too far in favour of the employee. That maybe under the Howard government it was too far in favour of the employer, but it hasn't been able to find a happy medium. It's gone too far the other way.
Yeah, I think that's a legitimate perspective. It's interesting if you look back over, say, the last 2 years, and if you were to think about, well, where are some of the landmark points at which we would look back at the current IR scheme and say the Fair Work Act has failed abysmally? I think you'd look at something like the Qantas dispute, you'd look at some of the very high-profile unfair dismissal cases, but I wonder whether any change or radical change to the system is necessarily going to be able to cure some of those issues. I wonder whether, and this is probably a fair provocation, is it really the system, or is it really those who are applying and determining the system, the tribunal members, who will always apply a level of subjectivity to a lot of their decision making? Does
the tinkering itself from government to government also create in itself a level of uncertainty and a burden, if you like, on business?
There's always going to be a short-term compliance cost that business will incur, and good for practitioners like myself, but there are a lot of business people who'd say that we need some stability, but I've always been an advocate that the system's got to strive to be right and be the best system for as many people as possible. The mere fact of having stability is no good to anyone if it's bad stability as opposed to good stability.
In terms of the ACT, you also calls for changes to casual rates. What exactly are they after in that regard?
So it's really interesting, this one, because if you're a casual employee, you get a loading, currently 25%, but what you're foregoing there is sick leave, annual leave, and in some states you'll get long service leave, but those two main types of leave, sick and annual, are things that you forego, and you get that highly loaded rate in exchange for that. I think what the ACTU is saying is that we want to actually give some of that leave back. Let's talk about trading some of that allowance or the loading down, what it might be, 15%, but casuals will get sick leave, I think, is what's proposed by this model, and annual leave. What's interesting is that I actually wonder whether a number of people who work as casual employees, recognise it's about 40% of the Australian workforce, will prefer that, or whether they actually like it the way it currently is.
Less money, isn't it, essentially, for a little bit more security in terms of leave?
Exactly right, and I think if you look at the demographic of people who do work casually, they'd happily say, I quite like this highly loaded rate that I'm going to get, don't really need holidays, don't really need sick pay, I'll take the money in the hand.
Indeed, look, a fascinating one, and particularly coming up to a federal election year. Joydeep, a pleasure as always. Thanks very much.
Thanks, James.
Now, 2013 will be a better year for the global economy, according to Alan Oster, the chief economist